welcome to another edition of the Heavy Duty Hub podcast. I'm Jeremy,
And I'm Chris.
and today we're going to tackle the subject of the vital role of a service advisor in the heavy duty dealership. Service advisors are probably one of the most prominent positions in the dealership. And the reason I say that is because they're forward facing with the customers, with the customers, with the technicians, with the service manager, with the parts manager, with the parts counter people. A service advisor touches just about everyone in the dealership and outside the dealership. So having a true, highly qualified, highly trained service advisor is key if we want to make money in our service departments.
They're like the Swiss Army knife of the service department, is the way I like to describe them. Just because you need them for every piece of the whole process for it to work the right way and to give our customers the best level of service possible, but also keep our technicians engaged, the manager happy. If we have a foreman engaged as well. So I really think that moniker of the Swiss Army knife really rings true with service advisors. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, it does, because they have to be skillful in so many different areas. you know, they're not just one area they focus on. They've got to, they have to be highly skilled in customer service, in organization, in their technical knowledge, their problem solving, and adaptability. They've got to be able to switch gears at any given point during the day and be able to pivot and handle a different problem or a different customer or internal customer.
Yeah. That's why I've always liked saying that and really looking at service advisors that way. I mean, I've seen them working on trucks with a technician, but then also assisting a parts person potentially with a parts lookup. When you really have an advisor that can kind of meet that criteria, that's when you know you're in a really good spot in your dealership for sure.
One of the, I guess you could call it a real turning point for me. We had one of our best customers. This customer brought us all their trucks, brought us all of their parts business. They were a massive customer for us. And it really drilled home the importance of a truly good service advisor, because we had a service advisor who, unknown to him, a truck was brought in. There was a driver of the truck, and there was another follow behind vehicle to pick that driver up and take him back to the dealership. Well, what he didn't know, as he's walking around doing his, four corners, taking pictures of the truck, checking the truck in, they brought it for a simple oil change and a couple lights were out on the truck. He, the whole entire time he was checking the truck in, proceeded to complain to that driver about the company, about how stupid they were, about how inefficient they were, that they were bringing us a truck for an oil change and to change lights when they could do that in their own shop. Why in the world were they bringing it to us? It just proves how inefficient they are. What he didn't know is that driver was the owner of the company. And the owner of the company didn't say a word to that service advisor. Didn't say a word. But when that service advisor walked back in the shop, he got back into his truck, took it back to their shop, then called the service manager and pulled every one of his trucks out of our shops. Every single one of them, and closed his account that day. That was a painful lesson. And it really got me thinking, you know, we have these people that are the key to our service business. Have we truly vetted them? Are they truly trained? Do they know their job? Do they know how to speak to customers? Do they know how to have empathy when a customer's standing in front of them and their truck's broke down? Or are they like that service advisor that I just told the story of who's out there bad mouthing everything and everybody? It really, really makes a difference in your business.
It does for sure. You can't have somebody, and I just call it a button pusher,
Yeah.
meaning I know how to open, here's the workflow process. I check your truck in, I get all your information, I open an RO, I take pictures, I do the walk around, whatever that process is. If that's all they do, yes, from an efficiency standpoint, it looks great. But to your point, did the customer or the driver mention a pain point or something that could potentially open the door to additional repair or business? So I think really probably one of the most underlooked skill sets in a service advisor is really understanding the customer and what they want versus what they need.
Yeah.
Very big distinction. Wants and needs. I always look at that kind of in my own personal life. Do I
Right.
want this or do I need it? There's a difference, right?
Yeah.
So just really understanding the wants and needs of the customer and then formulating your interaction plans. And it doesn't mean you be fake or non-genuine,
Yeah.
but really be empathetic and making sure that the customer understands the true offerings of what we can do for them in the dealership,
Yeah.
you know?
And the service advisors, their job is so difficult. And again, part of the biggest part of their job is having that empathy or being able to understand or being able to speak to people. Yeah, and I give the example of, how many times you've done it, I've done it, where you're talking to a customer, whether you're talking to them on the phone or you're in person, and the guy says, "Yeah, the right-hand side of my truck." Okay, the right-hand side. Are you talking about the passenger side or the driver's side? Where are you talking about? Are you sitting in the driver's seat or are you standing in front of the truck looking at the truck? So many times, just asking those right questions and figuring out what the real need is or what the real complaint is to help your technician be able to diagnose it quicker, correctly. And then not only that, but then now you have to go deal with the technicians. You have to deal with the parts counter people. You have to deal with your managers. You have to be able to adapt and have that empathy and communicate in all these different levels with all these different people. The service advisor really, really has a ton of weight on them in the dealership.
Yeah, kind of what you said about which side of the truck are they referencing reminds me of just the experience I had of I need a brake booster, and no one could figure out what a brake booster was that the customer was referring to. At the end of the day, it wasn't a brake booster; it was a brake chamber. But just not understanding the translation, because again, in a perfect world, every one of our customers comes from right around where our location is, but that's not always the case.
Right.
So, just like we all talk differently and have different dialects, customers have different names and meanings of parts. So, really having that vocabulary, I'll call it, to be able to understand what the customer means and the intention or what they're describing really goes a long way to getting the right diagnosis made
Yeah.
and moving that truck through. But you brought the point up as well, just kind of being able to have and organize all that information. Some of our viewers and listeners are lucky enough that they have a platform they can use to kind of assist with that process. So good for them if they do, but do they really use it to its fullest potential? And if you don't have something like that that can help you have that workflow and move through, you can still be very efficient. You just have to be very organized. So that really just goes back to that role of the service advisor and making sure that they have the skill set and the training to be able to manage that whole process from start to finish and not let anything fall through the cracks. That's the key to success.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And the service advisor, when that customer calls in, the interaction right at the beginning is so crucial also. Because how many times, and I'm sure you've done it, I've done it, everybody's done it, where you've called into a shop, maybe it's for your personal vehicle, maybe it's for a company vehicle, and the first thing you hear out of a service advisor's mouth is, "Want to be 2 weeks before we can get to it." Typically, typically what you do is you call the next person on the list to see if they can get your vehicle in faster. So having a service advisor who knows how to answer the phone to begin with is huge. But then also, and we use the term in our business all the time, keeping the RO live. And by keeping the RO live, what we're talking about is when that customer calls in or they bring their truck in and that truck gets into our shop. And as we start working on the truck, we talk to the customer when we say, "Hey, this is what we found. This is how much it's going to cost." But then as we get into the job, we find there's rusted bolts that break or something else is wrong that we need to fix. And if that service advisor doesn't have that communication or the ability to communicate with the customer, and they don't keep that customer informed as to the progress of their truck, you know, now we get a customer who calls 2, 3 days later saying, "Hey, what's going on with my truck?" "Oh, well, we found this or we found that, and it's not going to be $1,000 anymore. Now it's going to be $6,000. Well, now you've got an angry customer. Now you got a customer asking why, what happened, how come you didn't tell me about this? So the skills of that service advisor, again, are so vital. How do they answer a call to begin with? Their response should never be, "We're 2 weeks out." The response should always be, "Get it in here. Let's see what's wrong with it." You may be literally 2 weeks out, but you never tell a customer that over the phone. You get it
Now,
in there and look at it. Is it a quick fix? Could you push one of those other trucks aside for 20 minutes, fix what needs to be fixed, and send him on his way? As you're going through the repair, keeping that customer informed. "Hey, Mr. Customer, something happened. We need to get deeper into this. Are you okay with that?" So it's a real challenge for the service advisors.
yeah, communication is the key. And I always ask the question, especially when I'm training with a customer, is there such a thing as too much communication? And the answer is no. You need to over communicate relevant data and information. Now, if you have nothing to report, I still would rather someone say, "Hey, I have no new information. I will update you tomorrow or the next day." At least you're setting the expectation as opposed to just not, I don't have any data. I'm not going to say anything. And now the customer's calling you because now the customer starts to get upset, anxious because I haven't heard anything. My truck's been there. Because the thing we fail to realize in this industry, in our world, is that to us, it's just another truck. We don't realize to the customer that's their lifeblood. That's the tool they use to generate their income. And that's where that empathy piece comes in as well. I always like to say, look at it as if it was your truck, your vehicle. How would you handle that? And most people, because there's always that one, but most will be like, I would handle it differently. And I think that's where when you can kind of put yourself in the customer's shoes, even though they're not always happy, smiling, high-fiving you when they walk in because they know there's going to be pain. They're going to have to put money out. But that's where we can really do our part to make sure that that experience is the best it can be.
Right.
The expectations are set and clear, not only for us, but for the customer, and we can get that estimate as close to possible as being accurate. And if it has to change, explaining why
Yeah.
and updating the customer throughout the process. So there's no surprises at the end, which always ends up leading to now the service manager has to juggle time or money, which we don't want done. We don't want to mess with that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So if we do our part, everybody works, the cog is successful, no teeth are missing or broken, it's going to come through.
Right.
And, just making sure that, you know, those service advisors too, we talked about it. I said Swiss Army knife, but they're also the air traffic controller. You know, they got to make sure that no planes collide on the runway and everybody knows where they're supposed to go, what gate. That's really, you know, we use all these metaphors, but that's what a service advisor does. And if you have ones that struggle in an area, that's always to me an opportunity to teach them to make them better, because if they're at their best, guess what your dealership is going to be.
It's funny because here over the last, I'd say, almost a year, it's been about 9 months, 10 months. We've had a few different customers have called us and they've expressed their concern with their service advisors need sales training. They got to have sales training. And then you start looking at the dealership and the service department, and then you realize very quickly they don't need sales training. They need training as a service advisor
Oh yeah.
because you can make a lot more money and profit if they are efficient, if they're doing things correctly, if they're closing the RO in a proper time and getting everything done, communicating with the customer of any of those things that come up during the repair. We've seen dramatic swings in both total sales and profitability by training a service advisor properly. They didn't need sales training. You can't bring in more business on top of what they're not doing correctly to begin with. You're still going to be in the same situation. They have to be trained. They have to be skillful at what they do. And I don't, there may be other positions in the dealership, but that's one of the most important ones that have a truly trained, skillful professional in, rather than just plugging a gap with somebody who, needs a job. You need a true professional service advisor.
Yeah. It's just like in the parts department, right? You know, you think about who has the most interaction with the customers every day. In the parts world, it's not the people you would think, like the counter people, the manager, it's the drivers.
Right.
But in the service department, it's not the driver, it's the service advisor. They
Yeah.
are the face of the company to the customer. And to your point, that's where if you have gaps and you're not doing what you want to do or see, that's where you have to kind of audit yourself and look at the process, soup to nuts, and really figure out where the breakdowns are, where the weaknesses are, and focus on those things. And that's something we do quite well with customers, to your point, when we come in and we start with phone etiquette. How do you answer the phone the right way?
Yeah.
Then how do you process, what does your workflow look like? Is there any gaps in the workflow? All those pieces that we can teach and eliminate gaps. Good phone, good probing questions, friendly. I always like to say, and when we talk with dealers and train on phone etiquette, it's parts or service department, no, you got to be friendly.
Yeah.
Friendliness, helpfulness makes customers want to do business with you and happy. It's part of it, don't get me wrong. But just, when we don't realize how we sound over the phone, have you ever gone in somewhere where you talk to somebody on the phone, you walk in, you see them, you're like, oh, you didn't sound like anything the way you look or are. I had no idea. That triggers so many thoughts, by the way, of things over the years that I've experienced that with. But just, really, really training our people how to interact with customers, ask probing, engaging questions to get out of them what are they really looking for. That helps us provide an accurate solution to what they're calling about. So, that's where we do really well, not tooting our own horn, but just really helping customers understand what we can offer. But this is our process, set the expectation up front, not saying, hey, I can't touch your truck for 2 weeks,
Right.
but let's find out what they need. And then you never know, maybe we can get them in the next day.
Yeah.
But if we just generic, what if they just want a PM and we've already told them we're 2 weeks out?
Yeah.
So, that's where you just really want to make sure you're doing the right things. So,
And it's, again, we can't stress it enough. You need a highly skilled service advisor in that seat. And I know we're already out of time. It goes so quickly when we do these things. We love doing them. We'd like to ask you, our viewers, send us in suggestions. Send us in some thoughts. What do you want to talk about? What do you want us to talk about? Send it in to us. As always, everything will be on the screen as far as our emails and contact information. So please send them in to us. Let us know what you want to talk about, and we'll try and get it out on one of our next podcasts.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And always thank you for watching, and really letting us know what your pain points are in the dealership world. Jeremy and I both love, and I don't want to speak for you, but we love this stuff. And hopefully that comes through to each and every one of you. Like and subscribe. Our channel's growing and we're real happy with that. But we also want to make sure we're bringing and speaking about relevant things to each and every one of you. So that's all I have, Jeremy. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. We'll see everybody on the next episode.
Yep. Thanks, guys.